I never thought I'd run from my own daughter's home, but after hearing what her husband planned for me, I had no choice. I'm not a man who complains much. 65 years have taught me that life doesn't owe you comfort. I grew up in Ohio, raised 3 kids with my late wife, worked as a carpenter for over 40 years. My hands still carry the shape of a hammer, even though I haven't held one in years. When Sharon passed 7 years ago, something went silent inside me. I didn't stop living, but I wasn't quite living either. My daughter Katie has always been the strong one, fiercely independent, smart as a whip. She married Todd 10 years ago. At first, I was relieved. Todd came across as decent. He had a good job, a firm handshake, and always made a point of calling me sir. That changed, slowly, subtly, the kind of change that creeps in while you're looking the other way. After I sold my house last year, Katie suggested I move in with them. Said it didn't make sense for me to be alone in that big house anymore. Truth be told, I was tired of the silence. I missed people, even if they sometimes tired me. I moved in with just a couple of bags and my old recliner. They gave me the guest room near the laundry, said it was just until we figured out something more permanent. The first couple months were fine. Katie worked from home, so we had time to talk. She made me coffee the way Sharon used to. For a while I thought maybe this was what healing looked like, but then Todd got laid off. Everything changed after that. Todd tried to hide it, but I could hear the tension in his voice when he spoke to Katie behind closed doors. He drank more. He stopped coming to the dinner table. When he did, he made little digs at me, called me a freeloader once when he thought I wasn't listening. Katie told me to ignore it. He's just stressed, she said. He doesn't mean it. But stress doesn't make a man cruel. It just gives him permission to show the cruelty he was already holding. One night I got up to use the bathroom and overheard them arguing. Katie's voice cracked as she said, "He's my father, Todd. He has nowhere else." Todd muttered something I couldn't make out. Then Katie said, "You seriously want to put him in a nursing home? He's not even sick." The floor felt like it fell out from under me. I stood there, frozen, my own daughter defending me against her husband as if I were a burden to be pushed into a corner of society and forgotten. I shuffled back to bed and pretended to sleep. My heart raced like it hadn't in years. The next day, neither of them mentioned it. Katie smiled, asked me if I wanted eggs. Todd left early, didn't say goodbye. I played along. What else was I supposed to do? Where would I even go? Later that week, I heard Todd talking on the phone in the garage. I know I shouldn't have listened, but I did. He was talking to someone about senior care options and mentioned the words power of attorney. Said Katie would come around, and if not, there were ways to convince her. I went cold. I've seen what those places are like. I had friends who ended up in those homes. Fluorescent lights, smell of bleach, trays of food no one finishes. Their kids visit for birthdays and Christmas if they remember. I wasn't ready to be parked like an old car in a forgotten lot. That night, I packed a bag. Just one. My wallet, meds, a couple changes of clothes. I didn't know where I'd go, only that I couldn't stay. Katie was working in her office, and Todd hadn't come home yet. I left a note on the nightstand. "I love you, Katie, I really do. But I can't stay here anymore. I hope one day you understand." I took the back door, walked down the street like I was just stretching my legs. It was late enough that the neighbors wouldn't ask questions. I caught the 9:10 Greyhound heading north. Didn't have a ticket. Told the driver the truth. He let me on anyway. The next morning I found myself in a small town in Indiana. I hadn't been there in decades, but I remembered a buddy who used to live there. Pete and I served together back in the day. He owned a small auto shop. Might still. Turns out Pete had passed 5 years ago, but his son remembered me. Let me sleep on their couch for a few days. Told me I could do some small jobs around the shop for cash if I wanted. It wasn't much, but it was something. I felt useful again. I haven't called Katie yet. I know she must be worried, or maybe angry, maybe both. I think about her every night. I see her face when she was 7, crying because her bike chain snapped and she thought she'd never ride again. I fixed it that same day. She hugged me like I hung the moon. I want that version of her back, but I don't blame her. Not really. Life wears people down. It changes them, makes them pick between comfort and conscience. I don't know what Todd was truly planning. Maybe he was just venting, maybe not. Either way, I couldn't wait around to find out. A man knows when he's being moved off the board. The thing is, I still have good years left. Maybe not a lot, but enough to matter. Enough to make a choice for myself. I met a woman at the diner last week. Nancy. She runs the morning shift and brings me coffee before I even ask. She told me her dad moved in with her for 5 years before passing, and she wouldn't trade that time for anything. We talked during her breaks. Nothing serious, just easy conversation. But it reminds me what kindness feels like when it doesn't have strings attached. I don't know where this road goes. Maybe I find a room to rent. Maybe I get another job. Maybe someday Katie calls and we talk like we used to. But for now, I just breathe. One day at a time. I never thought I'd run from my own daughter's home. But when I did, I found something I hadn't had in a long time. Freedom, and maybe, just maybe, the start of something new. The air in this town feels different. Crisper somehow. I walk to the diner most mornings. hands in my coat pockets, passing by storefronts that haven't changed in years. There's something comforting about that. The barbershop still has the red and white poles spinning out front. The drugstore carries the same vanilla taffy I remember from back when I had knees good enough to kneel on. Nancy waves when she sees me through the window. Her smile feels like something real. She pours my coffee without asking, just the way I like it, black, hot, and strong enough to remind me I'm alive. "Morning, Jack," she says. "Sleep okay?" "Better than I deserve," I always answer. We talk a bit while she wipes down the counter or refills sugar jars. Her voice has that Midwestern softness, a little worn around the edges, like she's lived through a few things but still believes mornings are worth showing up for. Some days, we talk about nothing, whether the mayor's latest speech, some kid who got caught spray painting the old mill wall again. Other days I tell her stories from when Sharon and I used to road trip just to chase leaves in the fall. She laughs at all the right places, eyes warm, kind, but I never talk about Katie. Not yet. It's not that I don't trust Nancy, it's just that saying it out loud makes it real again. Makes me feel the way I did when I stood by the door, backpack slung over my shoulder like some runaway teenager instead of a man with silver in his beard. Sometimes I wonder if I should have confronted Todd, called his bluff, but then I think of the look in Katie's eyes when she said, "He has nowhere else." She wasn't pleading, she was desperate, not for me, but for the situation to go away, to fix itself. And I guess I did that, in my own way. Pete's son, Jimmy, has me helping out more now, sweeping the shop, checking fluids, making coffee for the morning crew. It's not carpentry, but it keeps my hands busy. And there's a kind of rhythm to the days that settles my nerves. He gave me a little corner of the office to set up my radio and leave my coat. Told me I can hang around as much as I like. "You're good for morale," he joked. Old guy wisdom keeps the boys in line. I smiled. Didn't tell him I don't always feel so wise. Still, it's good to feel useful. One night after the shop closed, Jimmy and I sat outside with a couple of root beers. He lit a cigarette and offered me one. I waved him off. "Used to," I said. "Quit after my first heart scare." "Smart," he said. "You miss it. Only when I remember who I used to be." He nodded but didn't press. A few moments passed in silence. "Yep." "No," he said. "My dad used to talk about you. Said you were the kind of man who didn't just build houses, you made them feel like home." That hit me harder than I expected. I had to look away. Swallowed the lump in my throat. "He was a good man," I said quietly. "You okay out here, Jack?" Jimmy asked. I thought about lying, about saying I was just passing through, but the truth is, I don't know what I am anymore. "I'm figuring it out," I said. "Well," he said, flicking ash onto the gravel, "if you ever need anything, this place is yours as long as you want it." Sometimes kindness feels heavier than cruelty. A few days later, I got a letter. No return address, but I knew the handwriting. Katie. My hand shook a little as I opened it. "Dad, I don't know where you are. I've tried calling, but your number goes straight to voicemail. I found your note. I don't even know where to start. I'm sorry. I should have said more. I should have stood up to Todd sooner. I should have asked you how you were feeling instead of assuming you were fine. You were always the strong one. It never occurred to me that you might be scared. Too, Todd and I are not in a good place right now. He said some things I can't forget. Did some things I can't forgive. I told him to leave. I don't know if he'll come back. And I'm not sure I want him to. All I know is, I miss you. I miss your stories. Your quiet presence, the way you always knew when I needed help, before I could even ask. Please, if you get this, call me, or write back, or something. I just want to know you're okay. Love. Katie. I read it 3 times. The last line blurred from the tears I didn't realize were falling that night. I sat on the edge of my borrowed cot and stared at my phone for a long time. I still had it. Still charged it. Still checked the time like it mattered. I didn't call. Not yet. I wasn't ready, but I wrote back. "Katie, I got your letter. I'm safe. I'm okay. That's the most important thing for now. I miss you, too. Give me a little more time. I'm not angry. I just need to understand some things inside myself before I can come back. Tell the boys I love them. Love, Dad." I mailed it the next morning. Nancy drove me to the post office. She didn't ask who it was for, just squeezed my hand before I got out of the car. The weather's been cooling down lately, leaves turning red and orange. Reminds me of those drives Sharon and I used to take. Reminds me how nothing gold ever lasts, but sometimes it returns in pieces. Nancy invited me to dinner last Sunday. Her place is small, warm, smells like cinnamon and roast chicken. Her daughter lives in Chicago, visits twice a year. She worries about me, Nancy said. I tell her I'm just fine. I've got a whole town looking out for me. I smiled at that, because I knew what she meant. We ate in comfortable silence for a while. Then she looked at me and said, "You ever think about going back?" I didn't answer right away. "Some days I do," I said. "Some days I think I already have. Just not to the same place." She nodded like she understood. We did dishes together. She played old country music on the radio. I caught myself humming along. She smiled, and for the first time in a long while I felt like I belonged somewhere. There's still so much I don't know. what Katie's life looks like now, what mine is becoming, whether the road forward leads back or farther out. But I know this much: I'm not done yet. I still wake up with questions, still lie awake at night remembering the laughter of my grandkids, the creak of my old porch swing, the way Sharon used to hum when she cooked. Maybe one day I'll go back, maybe I'll see Katie again, maybe we'll sit on the back porch with coffee and talk about the things we couldn't say before. But for now, I walk each day like it's a second chance. And maybe that's enough for now. Maybe just breathing and choosing where to stand is the beginning of something better. I don't know what tomorrow holds, but I'm finally okay with not knowing. I never thought I'd run from my own daughter's home, but out here, away from what I thought I needed, I'm learning how to live again. Some nights I wake up before dawn, not from dreams or nightmares, but from something quieter, a kind of restlessness that floats just beneath the surface of sleep. The silence in this town is thick but not heavy. It doesn't smother you the way the silence did in Katie's house after Todd lost his job. This silence feels earned, like the pause between the verses of a song that knows exactly where it's headed. I make myself coffee in the little kitchenette behind the shop, sit by the window, and listen to the wind slip through the trees out back. Sometimes I wonder if Katie is awake too, wondering where I am. I wonder if she reads my letter over and over, the way I do hers. Nancy stops by most evenings now. She brings leftovers, little things from the diner that didn't sell that day. Pot pie, cornbread, meatloaf. She always insists she doesn't want the food to go to waste, but I know it's more than that. We sit together on the bench outside the shop, watching the sky change colors like it's slowly remembering how to breathe. Last week, she brought a small photo album. Old pictures of her and her late husband, Tom, their daughter at the state fair, standing next to a prize-winning pumpkin. Nancy with a perm and shoulder pads, holding a cake shaped like a football. We laughed at how silly fashion used to be. She looked at one picture a little longer than the others, Tom standing behind her, hands on her shoulders, both of them grinning at something just out of frame. He wasn't perfect, she said, almost to herself. But he knew how to make me feel like I mattered, even when we fought, even when money was tight. I nodded. I knew that kind of love. I still carry it with me the next morning. A man came into the shop asking about me, said his name was Charles. He wore a gray jacket and had a cautious tone, like someone who expected bad news but hoped for better. "Are you Jack Anderson?" he asked. I hesitated before answering. "Depends who's asking," he smiled gently. "I work at a shelter 2 towns over. We got a call from someone who said you might need a place to stay. Said you were ... displaced." Displaced? The words stuck to me like wet paper. "I'm fine," I said. "Got a roof, got work." Charles nodded slowly. "I understand. I just thought I'd check in." He left a card anyway, tucked it into my coat pocket with a pat on the shoulder. Later that night, Nancy asked about it. I told her the truth. "Someone must have called," I said, worried I was living rough. "Maybe Katie." I shook my head. Maybe someone who still thinks old men belong on waiting lists for shared rooms and pills on schedules. Nancy looked at me with soft eyes. "You know," she said, "there's nothing wrong with needing help. We all do." "I'm not afraid of needing," I said. "I'm afraid of disappearing." The wind picked up outside, rustling dry leaves across the gravel. "That won't happen here," she said. And somehow, I believed her. A few days later, I went with Jimmy to a hardware store to pick up supplies. The cashier was a young man, maybe 21, with tired eyes and a cast on his wrist. He rang us up slowly, wincing now and then. "Rough day?" I asked. He smiled faintly. "Fell off a ladder last week. Boss said I should have been more careful." Something about him reminded me of my grandson, Dylan. Same shaggy hair, same quiet pride. "Pain meds help." He shrugged. "I can't afford to take them too often. Need to stay sharp." I didn't press, but I slipped a $10 bill into his tip jar when he turned to bag our things. Jimmy saw, but didn't say anything. On the drive back, he looked over at me. "You always like that?" "Like what?" "Helping people quietly, I guess," I said. "Not everyone needs a rescue. Sometimes they just need someone to notice." He nodded and turned up the radio. We didn't talk the rest of the way, but I could feel the space between us shift. That night, I found a letter on my cot. Nancy had slipped it in while I was at the diner. "Jack, I don't know what this is becoming. I don't need to name it. All I know is I haven't looked forward to anything this much in a long time. You remind me that life doesn't stop just because the calendar keeps turning. You listen. You show up if you ever need more than coffee and conversation. I'm here, no pressure. Just presence, yours." Nancy. I sat there, holding the paper like it was made of glass. No one had said something that honest to me in years. I didn't respond right away. I didn't know how, but the next day I brought her a book I used to read to Katie when she was little. That it was worn, pages yellowed, cover frayed at the edges. "Thought you might like this," I said. She opened it, eyes wide. "The Velveteen Rabbit," she whispered. "I used to read this to Maggie." "Me too," I said. "Used to think it was just a kid's book. Turns out it's about becoming real." Nancy smiled, then leaned in and kissed my cheek. No words followed. None were needed. Later that week I got a voicemail. Katie. Her voice was quiet, unsure. Double quotes, Dad. I hope you're safe. I got your letter. Thank you. I just wanted you to know. The boys ask about you, Dylan especially. He wants to show you his science project. He built a volcano. Said it would explode just like Papa's spaghetti sauce. I laughed harder than I have in weeks. Anyway. No pressure. I just miss you. I listened to it twice, then sat with the silence afterward for nearly an hour. She sounded older, not in a tired way, but like someone who'd stepped through something difficult and came out changed that night. I walked through the town alone. Buzzed overhead. A dog barked in the distance. I passed by the church, the park, the bench where Nancy and I first talked longer than just a few minutes. Everything felt still, as if the world had paused long enough to let me catch up. I looked up at the stars and whispered, thank you, not to anyone in particular, just to the night, to whatever quiet force had carried me. This far, I still don't know what comes next. Maybe I stay here. Maybe I find a place of my own. Maybe eventually I visit Katie. See the boys, help Dylan with his volcano, apologize for the things I couldn't say when I should have, but for now, I take deep breaths. I wake with the sun. I drink coffee with Nancy. I show up at the shop and I write small notes, thoughts, fragments of memories I don't want to lose. Maybe one day I'll string them together. Maybe someone will read them and feel less alone. Maybe it'll be Katie, or maybe just someone like me, standing at the edge of a choice they never imagined they'd have to make. I never thought I'd run from my own daughter's home, but here I am, and somehow I'm beginning to understand what it means to come home to yourself. The first frost came early this year. I noticed it clinging to the edge of the shop window just before sunrise, a thin lace of white crystals catching the morning light like spider silk. I stood there a while, mug in hand, letting the warmth of the coffee chase away the chill in my knuckles. But funny how the cold gets deeper as you get older, not just in your skin, but in your bones. But something about this morning felt softer, like the frost wasn't there to warn me, but to remind me that seasons change, that we do. Nancy picked me up around 8. She was bundled in a plaid coat, one hand gripping a thermos, the other waving me into the passenger seat of her old Buick. Hope you don't mind, she said as I got in. I thought we'd take a little drive. I didn't mind. We passed farms and fences, leafless trees lined up like sentinels along the horizon. The roads wound through stretches of land I hadn't seen since I was young, flat country that seemed to stretch for miles without interruption. Used to come out here with Tom, she said. Back when Maggie was little, she'd fall asleep in the back seat, and we'd just keep driving. No destination, just ... peace. I knew that kind of drive. I'd taken plenty with Sharon back when the kids were small. Before the world got so heavy with expectations and disappointments. Nancy turned the radio down and glanced at me. You ever think about going back? Her question hung in the air for a moment. To Katie, she nodded. I think about it every day, I said, but I don't know what I'd say. What I'd do if Todd opened the door. You don't have to know, she said softly. You just have to want to try. We stopped at a roadside stand, empty this time of year, but the old man who ran it still waved from his porch. Nancy got out and took pictures of the frost-covered pumpkins lined up in front of the stand. I watched her, camera in hand, laughter bubbling up like she was 20 years younger, and I wondered what it would have been like if we had met earlier, but then I reminded myself we met when we were meant to. That night, I wrote Katie another letter. Katie, got your voicemail. Dylan always had a creative streak. I'd love to see that volcano of his. I hope school is going well for the boys. I think about them often, and I think about you, too, more than you probably realize. I'm still taking things slow, still figuring out where I belong, but I wanted you to know that I'm doing okay, that I'm around good people. There's a woman here, named Nancy. She reminds me that life can still surprise you. Not every surprise is painful, Katie. Some are just late gifts. I hope you and the boys are finding your peace all right again, soon. Love, Dad. I dropped a letter in the mailbox before sunrise the next morning. The sky was that strange in-between color that isn't quite night or day, a little gray, a little gold. I stood on the curb and watched my breath cloud the air, and for a moment I let myself imagine what Christmas might be like this year. If I'd be back at Katie's table, or still here, in this quiet town passing the days with Nancy and the crew at the shop. I didn't have the answer, but for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of the question. Jimmy and I spent the next week repairing the shed behind the shop. The roof had caved in during the last storm, and the whole back wall leaned like a tired old man against the wind. He let me lead the project, gave me a pencil, a ruler and a scrap piece of wood, and said, "Your call." It felt good to measure and plan again. To get my hands dirty, to feel sawdust in my lungs. It reminded me that I wasn't just an old man with a past. I was still a builder, still capable of making something stand. Nancy came by with sandwiches halfway through the second day. She wore a knitted hat and gloves, face flushed from the cold. "Thought you boys could use a break," she said, handing me a ham and cheese wrapped in wax paper. We sat on an old tire and ate in the sun, silence filling the space between bites. "You look happy," she said after a while. "I feel real I said. She nodded. That's not nothing. That evening I walked her home. Her porch light flickered as we climbed the steps. Want me to take a look at that? If you want an excuse to come back, she teased. Just say so. I grinned. Good night, Nancy. Good night, Jack. I turned to leave, but before I reached the sidewalk, she called out, "Thank you for not giving up on life." I didn't answer right away, just lifted my hand in a quiet wave and kept walking. Inside the shop that night, I opened my old notebook. It was something I'd started back when Sharon first got sick, a place to write things I couldn't say out loud. Letters, regrets, prayers. Now it held thoughts of Nancy and Katie and all the small moments that were teaching me how to live again. I flipped to a fresh page. Tonight I saw frost on a windshield and felt grateful. Not for the cold, but for the fact that I noticed it, that I'm still capable of noticing, that I'm still here, still becoming. I put the pen down, closed the notebook, and stared out the window. Tomorrow was Thanksgiving. Nancy had invited me to join her and a few of her friends from the diner. She said they were bringing board games and pie. I said I'd bring mashed potatoes and stories, and maybe, if I was feeling brave enough, a call to Katie. Not to fix everything. To promise I'd come back, just to say hi. To hear her voice, to remind her that I'm still her dad and always will be. By the time the bus reached the edge of the city, my hands had stopped trembling, but my chest was still tight, like something had wrapped itself around my ribs and wouldn't let go. I looked out the window, watching the streetlights blur as we passed strip malls and quiet neighborhoods. I wondered if Emily had woken up, if she'd walked into the kitchen, found the empty cup of tea, and noticed I was gone. I imagined the look on her face, the panic, the questions, and then maybe the anger, but what else could I have done? When I stepped off the bus in the old part of town, it was almost morning. The air smelled of dew and damp earth, and I stood there for a moment, unsure of where to go next. My feet took me toward a small park where I used to take Emily when she was little. There was a bench under an oak tree still there after all these years. I sat down slowly, every joint in my body stiff and aching. The silence was thick. I sat there for what must have been an hour, trying to make sense of everything, and then I heard footsteps, soft ones, not hurried, not threatening. I turned. A man in his early 40s stood there. He looked familiar. Tired eyes, salt and pepper beard, flannel jacket. "Mr. Holloway," he said. It took me a second. "Daniel?" I asked. He smiled a little. "My mom still lives around here. I saw you sitting here and I wasn't sure it was you." Daniel was one of Emily's childhood friends. He used to come over after school with a backpack full of comic books and a big grin. He sat down beside me. "I thought you moved in with your daughter." I nodded for a while, but it didn't work out. He didn't ask for details, just nodded slowly. Sometimes silence says more than questions ever could. We sat like that for a long time. The sun started peeking through the trees, warming the cold wood of the bench. Finally he asked, "Do you have anywhere to go?" I hesitated. "I've got a little money saved. I can get by for now." He looked at me for a long time, then said, "You shouldn't be out here alone." I was too tired to argue. He offered to take me back to his place just for a few nights. He said. I agreed. His apartment was small but warm. His wife, Hannah, made me tea and laid out a clean blanket on the couch. Their little girl, Sophie, peeked out from behind a door and giggled when I smiled at her. Something about it made my throat tighten. Later that night, after they'd gone to bed, I sat on that couch staring at the ceiling. I could still hear Emily's voice in my head. The moment before I left, "I just need you to trust me, Dad." I wanted to. I truly did. But how could I, when the man she lived with was talking about me like I was a burden, a problem to be handled? Maybe I should have confronted him. Maybe I should have stayed and asked her to explain. But the look in Mike's eyes, it was like I was a piece of furniture that had overstayed its welcome. I didn't want to stay anywhere. I wasn't wanted. The next morning, Hannah handed me a plate of eggs and toast. She smiled like she'd known me for years. It was humbling. Thanked her and promised I'd be gone in a couple days, but she shook her head. "You're not putting us out. Stay as long as you need." That kind of kindness. It's rare these days. I tried to call Emily twice. She didn't answer. I didn't leave a message. I didn't know what I'd even say. Daniel came home that evening with a small job offer, just some part-time work at the auto shop he managed. Nothing heavy, mostly front desk and customer calls. I hadn't worked in years, but I agreed it felt good to do something, to be useful again. 2 weeks passed, then a month. Settled into a quiet rhythm. Sophie started calling me Mr. H and would sit beside me with her coloring books while I read the paper. Daniel and Hannah never treated me like a guest. They treated me like family. Still, I couldn't stop thinking about Emily. One Sunday afternoon, I was walking back from the store when I saw a familiar car parked down the street. My heart jumped. Emily was leaning against it. She looked tired, eyes red. She didn't speak at first, just walked up and wrapped her arms around me. "I've been looking for you," she whispered. I stood still, caught between relief and guilt. "I left because I thought it was best," I said. She pulled back, her eyes full of emotion. "I didn't know what Mike said to you. Not until after he told me he was just venting. But when I found your note, I knew something wasn't right. I didn't know what to say." "I'm sorry, Dad," she said. "You didn't deserve that." The weight of those words hit harder than I expected. We sat on the porch steps in silence. "I'm not asking you to come back," she said softly. "I just wanted you to know. I never wanted you to leave like that." I nodded slowly. "I know." She stood up, brushing her jeans off. "I'll call you. We'll figure things out." And then she drove away. I watched her car disappear around the corner for the first time in weeks. Something in my chest loosened that night. I told Daniel and Hannah everything. I didn't leave anything out. They listened without interrupting. When I finished, Daniel just said, "You did what you thought was right. That's all any of us can do." And he was right. The story wasn't over, but maybe now it could finally start moving in the right direction.